Awesome. Mr. Gregg Johnson.
Hello.
I suppose our meeting initially was from having a concussion injury, both of us, and yours was from service in the Army and a SAS soldier, mine from rugby. If we can start the first segment of our podcast or catch up, and just if you could briefly talk about your role in the SAS and the Army, so then the viewers understand where you're from.
So as a kid I grew up and I had dyslexia, and I knew probably then that school wasn't a strength, and left as soon as I could after fifth form, and I knew the Army was the only thing I wanted to do. So I had to wait a bit of time, but I went and did a pre-apprentice course in engineering, and then as soon as I could I joined the Army at the age of 17 into the Territorial Army part-time for a year and a half before I could or did go to the regular force. So joined the Army full-time in 1993. And joined there, and from the time I joined into the infantry here in New Zealand, I knew I wanted to be the best I could, and for us in New Zealand, the best in the Army is the Special Air Service, or SAS. So that was my driver to head towards that unit and do the selection course and get in. And it took me, maybe 6 or 7 years to make that choice to go and do that, through fear of failing. And finally a good friend of mine who was in the SAS sent me a letter application form in the mail, which I filled out and then started my training, and luckily November 1999 I did SAS selection and was lucky enough to pass. So joined the unit and did my year-long called a cycle of training in 2000 and was a badged member in September, October of 2000 into the SAS, and then started a journey within that unit. Was lucky enough to deploy quite early on, 2002, to Afghanistan, where I was just a team member, another team over there, and working to hunt down the Taliban, doing a mixture of vehicle mounted and foot mounted patrols, and also missions called direct action, where you would go out and just hit people within an area to capture them.
So that's quite incredible. For a person like myself, a civilian, you would say, and we don't understand how the basic Army works or the further extent of the SAS, how would you try and help us to understand your role in the SAS?
I'd say, within a context, especially for rugby players, the SAS would be looked at as the All Blacks, and it's that highest level that we can achieve in our sport, or for us in the military. So that was the highest level you could go, and could almost, the SAS, again, we could say, get the best games, so they get to do the best jobs and the best training around the world and the best opportunity.
With the highest things at stake, potentially.
Yeah, definitely. The missions that we were given and sent on were, at times of national importance. We could be tasked by the Prime Minister, and that was the level that we operated at. You would see, a lot of times conflicts were happening. It was just our unit or the SAS that would get sent to those. It wouldn't be the rest of our army, and there's lots of jobs we were sent on. Or the SAS in general got sent on that people still don't know about, and that was the level we operated at. We were also, at the time, ran the national counter-terrorism team, so there was a team of counter-terrorist soldiers who were on notice, 6 hours notice with pager, to respond to any terrorist accident or emergency in New Zealand, which is another part of the role of the unit.
And you had to continuously train to keep your skill set up to task and be available for all those events if they were to take place?
Yeah, and then the role, there was so much diversity in what we did that that training had to be constant. There wasn't a lot of time off through a year, and depending on the two sides, we'd have a deployable side which was called the green role, and a counter-terrorism side that was called the black role. If you're on the black role, you were at home, so you got a bit more stability. But if you're on that overseas role, the green role, you'd be away. You could be away 8, 9, 10 months of the year, away on training, doing different things around the world or here in New Zealand. And there wasn't a lot of time. You'd go to work on a Saturday and a Sunday, and guys would be there working on stuff because that's what it required.
Yeah.
And that's what was needed. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of downtime, and people suffered accordingly.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So the commitment it must have taken to be in the SAS, did that influence your fear with, like, you said that you felt it took a long time to get the courage to apply and then go through the training, but then the commitment you would have known it would have taken, is that part of the fear? Or?
No, because that's what it was the dream.
That's what you wanted to
Yeah, it was. Yeah, all of that's what I wanted. That was the
pressure.
level of soldiering that I wanted,
Yeah.
and I wanted to achieve. And the fear was failing that. The fear was setting that goal of getting there and then not achieving that. That was my fear. And it was again until my mate said, what do you got to lose? Gratefully, was the push I needed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Support.
Really good friend. Yeah. And in the respect to go, we know that you're good enough to make it if you apply yourself.
Yeah.
So that was meant a lot to me, and allowed me to make that choice. Yeah, which was pretty quick. Once they'd sent that, it was pretty quick once I got it, there was no questions from that point. I just signed the application and put it in. Yeah.
So with the normal citizen would probably know and hear about the stories of how ruthless the SAS soldiers are,
Yeah.
and how resilient they are. What was some of the training resumes you went through?
Probably starting with that 9-day selection. That's different. Here in New Zealand, you don't get fed a lot. Like an example, through the 9 days, breakfast was, you'd get like 3 baked beans, 4 baked beans, you'd get half an egg. That would be, you get maybe a little bit of a sausage for breakfast. That would be your start of the day, and then normally at night when you'd finish whatever that day's activities were, you'd get some soup, and it was a pretty runny soup, and you'd get about a ladle of that, and if they deemed you'd be good, you'd get a bit of old white bread, if that wasn't always the case. But so it's really hard. You really go through this not only physical stress of the selection, but also a thing of hunger. So you're getting asked to walk further distance every day. You've always got a pack and webbing of 25 kgs and a rifle, and those distances just get further, and you're navigating. And that demand is not only physical, it's mental and emotional, because you're pretty hungry, and it's pretty hard. In the middle, you do a thing called the jerry cans. Mine was in the Kaipara desert, where for 20 hours you're walking around with a 20-litre water jerry can and a team of 5, and you've got 6 jerry cans, so the person at the front's always got 2. You've still got your pack, and you're walking up 100-metre sand dunes. You're doing that for 20 hours. Where I come out of that with no skin left on my hands, and then you've still got plenty of selection to go, and still again not getting fed a lot. And it's rigorous, and once I got on operations, you understand why that test is like that, and it's requiring those people that have resilience and mental toughness and that to survive, not only the training but operations as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the people, you start with a group of men,
Yep.
What's the numbers like compared to the start and the finish?
I think my course started with 37 or 40, and I think 6 of us finished. 5 of us got accepted into the training.
Is that once a year that the selection process go through?
It varies, When I did it was once a year.
Are there any women in the SAS?
Not that I know of at the moment. It's open to them to do selection now, but I don't think any have passed.
That's just purely because the standard.
Just the physical nature.
Some, great if they could.
Yeah, I've met plenty of women who could. Maybe it's not a lifestyle that they choose. Yeah.
Very demanding, especially if you wanted to be family mother.
Yeah.
Even as a male, the expectation to fulfil the SAS dream.
Yeah.
and the pressure we put on your family, much like a professional athlete.
Just like a professional athlete, and we see a lot of relationships break down because of that, because the unit asks so much of that person that it becomes a conversation, and most people I know have had to have that conversation of, is it the unit or is it me? And the kids. And that's a hard conversation, and a lot of those have gone, it's the unit. And then the relationship breaks down. So yeah, there's a lot to that job, like high performance sport, that does take a toll on family life.
Yeah.
And lack of understanding, there's a lot of the job that we did, not a lot of it's talked about, so families don't understand, friends don't understand, which makes it hard as well.
Yeah. So with your training, what were a couple key challenges that you faced to overcoming the expectations and the failure aspect of it?
I think personally I was lucky that because I was a good soldier, I didn't find it hard. What I did find was that it was constantly challenging to reach the standard. The standard was pretty high, well, not pretty high, the standard was high, and if you didn't meet that standard, you were removed pretty quick from the training. And so it was just that, for that almost year long, when I did a training course, the courses were very different, but keep coming. So you do a month of a course and a month of a course and a month of a course, and just the variation from signals training, Morse code, to medical training, to a whole lot of different things. Yeah, just that nature, and having to retain that information and then keep that for down the track. That was a challenge, but the course for me was so enjoyable. What I was doing is my dream, so yeah, it wasn't hard in that aspect.
Was there ever a moment you thought you were close to failure or giving up?
No, more so on the selection than the cycle. Yeah.
What's the difference there?
So the selection's just the test to start the training.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So on the selection, I got to a point where I was tired. I had no skin left on my hands. I said I didn't have a lot of skin left on my feet. My feet were pretty sore, and I got to a point where I actually gave up, and I put my little fly sheet up and I got under it, got naked, jumped in my sleeping bag. It was middle of the afternoon, and we had radios each, and the radio called up and called my number 23, where the hell are you? You're meant to be at this checkpoint already. And I'd given up, but as soon as I heard that, I got up, put all my stuff on, and I continued. So it's one thing I talk to a lot of people about. I think not everybody, but a lot of people I know and I've talked to do give up within that test period, but then choose to go on. And I think that's an example of, when you hit the wall like I had, but then having that conversation with self, like, no, you need to get on, and that taking the next step once you've stopped, I think is a key learning I took from that.
That next gear.
Yeah. Knowing you've got it, but we've got to be pushed to get to that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people these days don't get that push.
Yeah.
To know that there is more in you. There's, you can keep going if you try, but you just got to try. Not everybody finds that next step, but gratefully I did.
Yeah.
But so then on to the training, like I loved it. It was the dream. So I was just just a boy living the dream, and that for me made it much easier. Yeah.
Well. Yeah. And did you have moments when you were actually finally an SAS soldier and you had fear of failure, challenges, or?
Yeah, I think once you're in the unit, the whole time's a fear of failing, because that standard is so high, and there's some amazing people there. Again, you could look at the rugby circles and just see, when we see greats, and you're a young player and you see these greats and you finally make a team that they're in. It was like that for me. There's some legends in that unit, and the standard that they held across the unit was amazing, and living to that every day was a real, could be a real challenge. The expectations on you across a whole lot of things were really high, and it took work. It wasn't a free ride. You never got a free ride. So I think that there was always that fear of, am I good enough? Am I a pretender? Which is really interesting.
What classified the legends? What made them the legends?
I think being like that next level good,
did they get that good label from service?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would be the types of missions that would give them that label?
Everything from training to their mindset, the way they conducted themselves, operations they'd been on.
Yeah.
The way they led people was a big one for me. Like I always looked up to good leaders. In the SAS there were good leaders, but there were the great leaders. And it was those guys that I looked up to, that you could just see they looked after people, they understood people, they took care of their guys, and they worked as hard as they could to be the best they could, and just had a real proactive approach to things, which I think I admired and aspired to be that once I become a leader.
Yeah.
Set the tone for how I wanted to be in the future.
So you went through that process of the selection, making the training. How many years in service did it take to become a leader? And what was your leadership role?
For me, a couple of years, and then I got promoted to Lance Corporal. So when you go to the SAS, you lose all your rank and start again. A couple of years to get back to Lance Corporal. And then I got out and went overseas, contracting for 3 years in Iraq, where I was a team leader over there, and then come back to the SAS after 3 years away in Iraq. And I was promoted not long after that to team leader to corporal. Maybe 5 years, 6 years to get to that level. Taking that, I'd already done 9 years in the Army before I got to the SAS, so I already had some time. Plus that.
So what were some of the leadership values or learnings you tried to pass down?
Would have been understanding my people, understanding them and what their passions were within our job, understanding who they were as people, and then as a team leader, trying to provide them the space within our team to thrive in that. Giving my people an example, my team medic, he would do all our team medic training, planning for all our training in that realm. Our explosive guy would do all the training in that, and just giving those guys that were passionate about something the lead role. So I didn't always, I wasn't always having to do that. I'd give it over to them, and again, that allowed them to thrive in that space that they enjoy. That's probably the biggest. Understanding my people and then giving them what they needed to be the best that they could be.
When you were in maybe pressure situations in Afghanistan or in Iraq, could you touch on some of the experiences you had in overseas and some of the lessons you learned from that, and maybe some of the learnings you could share?
I think some of the big ones for me would be, one, trusting your people, like, knowing that they've been through the training and understand, and that they have got your back and you've got their back when you need it. And I'd probably caveat that with that's so important when your life's on the line every night you go to work. And in Afghanistan we were working mostly by night, so just knowing that every time you left the gate that your life is on the line if somebody doesn't do their job, that's important. So as a leader, making sure everybody knew their job and was good at their job, and that was super important. Understanding where people were within themselves on that spectrum of risk, maybe. Understanding, I always remember we went back to Afghanistan in 2008, I think, and we were getting ready to go out on the first mission since we'd arrived back, and we had a brief on the job we were going out, and me and the other team leader were laughing and joking, and a young soldier came up to me, SAS guy, and said, "Man, how are you guys joking? We're about to go out on a mission." And I said, we're relaxed now because we've been through this before, but once we get out the door, then it'll be real. But we don't need to be that until we are out the door. So it's just for me. And then that was a learning that not everybody was comfortable in that space all of the time. So knowing how those people were and when they weren't maybe in that space, and how we provided support, I provided support to them.
Being able to switch on and off when you needed to.
Yeah, which is important because over time, a 6, 7, 8 month deployment to a war zone, if you don't find those switches to turn off, it can affect you. We see that a lot with people who come out with post-traumatic stress and things like that.
Not being able to get the balance, so then they look after themselves mentally and be able to do the job. And
again, like we're seeing in sport, high level sport, when you run at a level that that you're operating in the stress all of the time, whether it be physical or mental or emotional, or the expectation for a team to win all the time, and maybe you're not winning. They're all stresses that, if we carry those for too long, they can affect us, physically, mentally, emotionally, like I keep saying, and no different for us. There's a term now, operator syndrome, where people are hurt just from that. Being in a stressed environment all the time and not coming down is not good for you and causes a whole lot of effects.
Yeah. I could imagine for the normal citizen to go out into war as a soldier or SAS, that's just the idea of putting your life on the line is too much. For me, it'd be crazy. You've got to be really committed to that, and it takes something quite interesting with your consciousness, I guess, to be able to commit yourself to that for your country.
Yeah.
It's more than the job and the money.
Yeah. I think, definitely not the money. We weren't paid very well. Yeah, we weren't doing any undie adverts, so
Nah,
it wasn't a lot of sponsorship, bro. But in reflection, it's something like I was chosen to do it, and I don't know in what realm that was, but kaitiaki, the Māori word for guardian, is something that I've reflected on in the past, and the guys I served with and served closely with, I think we're all chosen to be warriors, and that's the path that we took, and that was the path that was laid out for us. And it's definitely something I saw in reflection. Is we were these warriors, and that was the role we were given, and that's why we passed the selection and did the job. Like you guys that play high level rugby, it's that only few get to go that far, and it's that mindset, I think, and personality type that get there.
Yeah.
I think it was the same. We were just who we were, and it's where we were meant to be. And
Yeah. I think I've got a lot of respect for you, honestly, because of there are similarities between rugby and SAS soldier, but the commitment you show when it comes life and death, although rugby is dangerous, life and death is something really different, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's something where I think you should be praised and should be looked up to from our society. With some of the night missions you went on,
yes,
would you be able to touch on some of those experiences?
Yes, most of the things we were doing, there was a list of priority targets called the Joint, or JPAL list, the Joint Priorities Effects list. So it was a list in Afghanistan of all the hierarchy that were causing trouble. So just a quick thing on history, Afghanistan was all about the Taliban trying to create instability. So the government didn't look good. And the power was then moved to support the insurgency versus the local government. And what a lot of people don't know or may not know is that the Taliban attacked and killed more of locals than they did any military, and they did that to create that instability and fear. So our job was to go out and try and stop those people from doing that, and we did it through a whole lot of methods. But most of the time our choice was to go and try and capture people at night in their beds. Because that was the safest for us. Any time you got in a gunfight was dangerous. So a lot of our missions were, like I said, at night, and we would go and climb their walls with ladders and sneak in and try and take them out at night while they're asleep, and that was most effective for us. Biggest thing, we were trying to capture people as well to gain intelligence, so that once we captured somebody, then that intelligence would be fed back into the system, and then we could hopefully capture more people. And again, another misconception was the SAS was over there doing all of this. We're actually only supporting an Afghan police unit, the crisis response unit, to do this, and we weren't arresting anybody. It was the Afghans arresting their own people with lawyers and prosecutors and a full, like the police, a full package. We weren't just out there capturing who we wanted to. It was all very detailed and targeted.
But you were just the elite service that provided that.
Yeah, we had other skill sets, like a higher level of trauma medicine. We had explosive breaches, so people who would use explosives to breach doors and walls. A higher level of sniper support and other technologies that the Afghans just didn't have. So we facilitated a lot of that for them to allow them to do their job to the best of their ability.
Well, the type of destabilising that the Taliban did, what would they use as tactics to do that?
Just things like attacking school buses or buses, with the populace on, attacking hospitals, attacking any of the universities and anything girl related, they would attack those sort of things. and again, that was just creating the fear, if people didn't go to school or, couldn't go to the doctors, that's just, instability.
With explosives.
Yep.
Guns.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of the big spectacular attacks that you saw is a famous...
On the news.
Famous photo of Willie Appiato walking in the street. I think that was about 5 or 6 suicide bombers that day we responded to in the town of Kabul, causing trouble.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
And were you able to work with Willie a bit?
Yeah.
And how did he become famous, like, internationally, and then be really a real icon for the SAS in New Zealand?
Yeah, and I think that's a heavy burden. I'd never speak for Willie, but I know, and I've talked to him, winning that medal is pretty heavy to carry.
Yeah. He carried a friend out of danger.
Yeah. In a gunfight. But the repercussions of that, there's a lot of pressure on him now to be somebody maybe that he doesn't want to be. Yeah.
Well, I think it makes people from our country to be really proud to have someone like him and yourself. Obviously. To do that service, and we're really well known around the world for our skill set in the SAS. Is that right? Yeah,
I think that if we just took individual soldier operator as they're termed, we'd be on par with anybody in the world. The other thing, the difference is a lot of those other units around the world have a lot more money than us. And technology, those sort of things. But soldier to soldier, anything in the bush, New Zealand would be probably up there with the best.
Oh, that's good. Bush would be like tracking. Hand-to-hand combat?
No, we don't. Yeah, it's not. We do obviously train in that, but probably not to the level of other countries. But anything in the bush tracking, we still run the international tracking school here for most special forces or high level of special forces. That's it. How well we're regarded in that realm. Yeah.
Wow. That's just probably the last question about that I haven't actually asked you. Have you had close life or death scenarios during your time in Afghan or Iraq?
I think another funny thing is I've probably had more contacts with the Afghan police than I ever did with the enemy. I mean, as in shooting, because we would operate at night a lot of times in local vehicles and dressed in local clothes. We'd be driving through checkpoints, at 2 or 3 in the morning with night vision goggles on, with no lights on, and the old, the local Afghan police would be pretty trigger happy, and you'd get shot at quite a few times. So I had a few of those. But any time we were engaging with the enemy, like one we did, my team would always split into 2 teams normally, not always, but one would cordon off a compound and would have snipers up on roofs and that. And then the assault team would turn up and they would go and help the Afghans clear the building. But we did one job where the assault team had got lost, and it was my team doing the cordon, and we got there and we were in the middle of the day. We'd chosen to do it during the middle of the day because we knew the guy was there at this house. So we went in and we cordoned it off, and anyway, you're waiting and you're looking at your watch and the team's not turned up to do the assault yet, and me and another senior team guy we had a conversation and was like, man, we need to do this ourselves because these guys, we don't know when we're going to get them, and we're in the middle of Afghanistan by ourselves, and there was only, 8 of us, standing there, and it's not somewhere you want to be with 8 guys in the middle of nowhere. So we made the decision, and anyway, we went in and started clearing this compound, and the brief for us was this guy always wore a suicide vest. Anyway, we went in, and because we had such low numbers, we were just clearing rooms by ourselves, and I cleared the room that the guy was in, and jumped on him and detained him, and it was an interesting experience. But that was could have been life or death, but everything we went out on was that close.
So the importance, like the SAS have the elite skill set, the importance of just the simple timing, making sure that you get these simple things done well under pressure is definitely life or death in war.
And things were down to that, to seconds and minutes, and that's how precise we tried to be. Didn't always obviously work, but always factors within that. But yeah, it's certainly what we tried to do, because that's what it needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the detail. When you operate at that level of seconds for a long period of time, again, we've talked many times, but yeah, it can have a real effect on you.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I suppose we want to get into talking about chapters, but if you could touch on what you've been getting into in the last few years, and then how the chapter of the SAS experience in Afghan and Iraq has helped you with what you're getting into now.
Yeah, so the biggest thing once my transition out of the Army, I'd started studying combat psychology, so understanding how people are during war and conflict in 2007, and I started studying that just to make myself better, but also the teams I was operating in, understanding if we could understand the psychology of how people got hurt, then we could find ways to not get them hurt. Talking for me at the time was post-traumatic stress, so learning if there were tools and techniques we could do to stop people getting mentally hurt from their time in war. And that just led into, once I got out of service and the more learning I did, just got a real understanding that using nature or outdoors as a tool to help people, and seeing a lot of research out of America and what they were doing, and seeing in Outward Bound in America, veterans get a free course, two courses for free as part of their therapy if they need it. And that was something really opened my eyes, and I spent some time working in Thailand on something else, but then come back and decided I want to go to Outward Bound and become an instructor there to see how I could use the outdoors to help our veterans and emergency services. So that took me on a path of going back to school for a year, and then heading to Outward Bound as instructor for a year, and then getting out and trying to forge a path in the veterans space and emergency services, getting them out into nature, and found that space here in New Zealand to be incredibly hard to do. One, it's not very well understood, and again, as we'll talk later, is just it's a New Zealand mindset that I don't feel we always do what we need to do to be better. So just found that really hard. So then got offered a chance to go back to the Army in the youth role with the Youth Development Unit in Christchurch. I went back and started doing that, but found that incredibly challenging in the way of, I didn't find them set up as best as they could, and I found some of the people that worked there weren't as good as I thought they could have been, and so I was pretty direct, and chose to head off to another path and went to a training role within the infantry battalion, which I did for a couple of years, and then again chose to leave, just knowing there was other things I wanted to do. That's where, during my time in the Army, during COVID and things started getting locked down, and I started looking at the mental health and resilience picture within the Army, and I'd been asked some questions around what could we be doing for our young people in that space. So that led to me reaching out to some friends here in Nelson, or out in Maraho, and from that we created a program called Pakari, which is a resilience program, and we offered that to Army and ran 5 courses for them and had amazing results, and just identifying that young people now is not as resilient as they used to be. However, as soldiers we still need that resilience, so the course ran for them and just introduced them to some tools and ideas that help them to see resilience in a different way and to be better. And we used nature out in Maraho, the beautiful Abel Tasman National Park, to do that, and had amazing results, and now looking to push it further.
I'm stoked to be able to hopefully help you spread your the Pakari adventure and be able to provide more funding and resources so we can help people that are in need of it. What was it that made you identify the issues with our youth or people that are hurt and need help, but actually drive towards to do it, be motivated to actually do that? Was that something where you learned with your service, your time in service, or I think something within yourself, or what was it that made you really be motivated to do that?
Definitely both. It's my personality, but also the SAS, because the SAS has these 4 tenets, and that's what we all live to, and they're written in gold. They're almost biblical, in nature. They are what we live to, and people do, and that's what you're held to. So I think it was 2 parts. One, who I am as a person, the drive to go to the SAS is the example. to be the best I could be within that unit, and those tenets always driving me to be better, I think were what made me get out and see that. And for me, I hear a lot of talk, and you and I have discussed it before, like we hear about our mental health in New Zealand, and all I hear is talk. There's very few people I actually see doing anything of action. So that was for me is, I'm about action, I'm about doing, and my time in the SAS was about doing. We didn't just talk, we did, and we had to do to live. So I think I've just carried on that, and I get frustrated now when I hear all these people talking about things but not seeing an outcome of that. And that was a part of seeing what was happening in Army. There was a lot of beautiful brochures on mental health and resilience, and when I asked as a trainer, I've been training people for almost 30 years, when I asked that question of what's the training of this, nobody could give me an answer. So, we had some beautiful literature, but as you and I have discussed before, and for a lot of people, we don't just learn from literature, we have to read a book, and then there has to be some sort of application of that to take home what you need. So long-winded, but that's
awesome.
That's what it was.
Saves a lot. And you have a lot of empathy for people that are hurting, and you can see how they could be so much better if they just built their resilience and strength and then become healthy.
Yeah, and a big part of that's from my own journey.
Yep.
Seeing that I've moved through a path of whatever to now and ongoing, just seeing my own journey's been these bits put together, and knowing that it works for everybody. Well, not everybody, but we've got to offer it. Yeah.
So I suppose that's the other thing we have in common with my situation with rugby, and how I've sort of been disappointed in the care that we've had.
Yeah.
Is having ongoing concussion problems, and you with the Veterans Affairs, and then we've both, and you've actually been really helpful for me to understand that assessments are very different than care.
Yeah.
Maybe if you could touch on how the care would look for someone like us compared to an assessment to say that we aren't right cognitively, or we're having emotional changes to rebuild ourselves so we can handle that with better resilience.
Yes.
What would be some good steps, and how does Pakari provide that?
I think that's it's a big question, but the parts of it, just your story with rugby, and we could talk about Billy and other players that are hurt, and from what I've seen as an observer of the rugby space, and knowing you, in my own case with Veterans Affairs, there's a point we get to where they're very, there's a lot of examinations and a lot of assessments which has an outcome of you are hurt, however they're defining that, like for you and me, we have ongoing concussion symptoms, and that's having an effect. The big part I'm not seeing is a treatment coming from that, as in, okay, now we know you're hurt, what can we do to make you better, or how can we help you have the best quality of life you can have with this injury?
Yeah.
And when I ask people and look, and again in my own case, that's non-existent. I'm not seeing that treatment pathway for anybody, especially in the rugby field. For me, it's again the answer to the question would be, how does Pakari help? Well, Pakari helps by, especially with our younger people, educating them on what the future can look like and giving them tools to be ready for that future. The program runs over a period of 5 days and just offers tools, and then gives practical experiences where they can feel for themselves what those tools are like in real conditions, so they can take those forward. But then again, for any of us that are hurt, that pathway is finding holistic treatments that work for us, and it's something we do real poorly in New Zealand, the holistic nature of treatment, where all my stuff I've seen out of America, especially in the veteran space around that, they're doing a lot more, and we've known that there's some real gold standards of help that people are getting through, this holistic nature. So that...
Which is sort of specific to like the holistic nature that you're talking about, is we need medical care, which might be a neurospecialist, neuropsychologist, not neuropsychologist, and if that means medication, that's okay. But the holistic part would be nature, health and well-being, some emotional resilience through challenges and overcoming them, which Pakari provides.
Yes.
the community thing's really big for us as someone that's been injured, and I know this to be Billy's struggles where he was isolated. He was being told by doctors that he had depression, or it was something bipolar. And not to pass any blame, but just to try and understand what he needed to be better. It would have been as simple as to be introduced to a community that had someone like yourself, a veteran that's been having concussion problems. Carl Heyman, someone that had been in contact with New Zealand Rugby, ACC, that has had ongoing concussion and diagnosed as CTE, probable CTE. I think that's the big part of the community aspect we're talking about, and that comes under that holistic care.
I think people see or hear holistic and they think hippie, but for me, and you've talked, and my partner Nicole, holistic is just a whole lot of things coming together to help something, and it is so important. And there's so many things that we've been showing you that holistically help our people. But again, in New Zealand, we seem to be so far away from one understanding that and to accepting it. As I told you in my own case, the second neuropsych I went to told me, when I asked her if she'd dealt with anybody with my condition or what caused my brain injury, and she had talked to 240 of her colleagues in New Zealand, and not one had heard of the breeches brain, as it's termed. There's who do I go to in New Zealand to seek help if not one expert here in New Zealand understands my condition, as you've found with concussion and rugby players. There's a lot of people saying we're concussion experts, but again, as I talked about before, I'm seeing them get to people to a diagnosis, but then not the treatment path, where that holistic treatment path is what we need. And knowing Billy's story, there's people on our journey that are further down the track that if we do get the opportunity to talk to them, we can see there is light, there is help, there is a way to be better. And we definitely didn't see that with Billy's case. And I find it incredibly hard when I hear people talking about, Billy and mental health without an understanding that mental health, whatever it was labelled, more than likely come from an injury to his brain that wasn't treated effectively, through a diagnosis and then not a holistic treatment path. So, anybody that's listening, if you're just labelling somebody or something, and especially in the sports realm that's in a contact sport, and you think it's a mental health thing, we'll dig a little deeper and make sure it's not an injury of some type that's also affecting them.
And this is where we have something really in common, and we're basically trying to speak to get better solutions and care for us and others, obviously, because there's a lot more of boys like us. So if that was given to Bill, I suppose we could think that he may be with us today. So it's important that we start addressing these things pretty promptly. What other parts of that holistic care have you experienced that have been really good with maybe obviously the HBOT, hyperbaric chamber, and some of the nutritional things that you've taken?
Yeah, definitely for me, diet, obviously eating a good clean diet. No alcohol has been a big thing, trying to limit caffeine. But for supplements, creatine, a lot of research has been done on creatine and brain health. High dose fish oil, omega-3s, super important. Magnesium at night for all the processes that it does. I think they're the keys that I knew originally and had been doing for a long time. And the hyperbaric oxygen is something that changed my life. Just knowing that a hyperbaric oxygen protocol can help heal your brain. I know that played huge dividends in me slowly getting better. But since then, as you and I have talked, finally going to see a holistic medicine doctor and getting my full blood work done, full as in 12 vials of blood, and really digging into the effects of my service. That's shown me a whole lot of things, or the doctor, and now we're on a pathway to be better at the level of my, right down to my mitochondria or any energy levels, energy systems. So again, back to that, if players or people aren't getting that sort of detail, then I don't know if we're ever treating the full cause of what's happening with them.
No, well, so my experience with some doctors and the specialists is we've got this long-term brain damage, and then there's nothing you can do, which holistically you can, and it might not be to completely cure you like you were before,
Yeah.
but you can build the resilience and tolerance to live the best life possible.
Yeah.
And it gives you more hope.
Yes.
It gives you more ability to be ambitious and progress.
Yeah.
And like some of the things with creatine, I haven't been on that since playing rugby,
Yeah.
so I'm stoked to be back on that through you.
Yes.
And this has definitely helped me with the hyperbaric chamber.
Yes. Yeah.
How you know of other chambers in New Zealand, and it's becoming more common, but in rugby, it's not. We don't. In the super level, I don't know about the All Blacks, but provincial and super level, they aren't providing this service. Do you think that could be beneficial for the highest elite rugby players?
Yeah, I think for anybody, it's. I think there's something like 150 conditions. Just in a general pitch, it helps, but we know it helps the brain, and it helps the brain heal. And if we understand injury, stepping back, that's probably stepping back from that. But again, what I'm seeing is we've got all these people with this brain injury, but we've got rugby talking about not currently linking CTE to it. I almost, as an observer, feel that we're waiting for this link to CTE before we start helping people. But I still know 100 people that have got, ongoing concussion symptoms from their rugby. Whether they have CTE or not, we need to be helping them. Yeah. So we don't need to wait for this link to CTE. The injury is I've got ongoing symptoms from concussion. Sorry for a rant on that, but that's what we need to be helping them today. If you get CTE or diagnosed at some stage, then, but we can be dealing with that. HBOT for me, or hyperbaric oxygen therapy, things we haven't looked at in New Zealand at all because we're, a little bit naive. If somebody had a concussion and got the opportunity to do hyperbaric oxygen, could they be better quicker? Or would that allow their brain to heal to a point more so than just the 3-week stand-down protocol? There's all these things, taking these supplements that are holistically good for our health, not just for brain health, but, the fish oil, these things that you can go on Google and find a million doctors talking about the health benefits of these things. If our players were getting these key ingredients within their recovery program, nobody's done the science to see what that would look like at the end of a player's career. One head knock and then another head knock. If we were really helping that in that first period, what does that look like? We don't know. Yeah. What we do know is if you have repetitive head knocks, there's a high likelihood that you will get CTE. That's what the literature shows us, whether you want to accept that or not. It's the literature what says that to be true. Not everybody gets it, like everybody doesn't get cancer, everybody doesn't get post-traumatic stress, but some people do, and a high percentage of people do. Yeah. So we have to help that.
It's something that we're probably, it's definitely why I've been motivated to speak, and after seeing Billy and what he went through, there's a couple things that we aren't addressing in rugby with concussion, and I'll just touch on it now, which is our age grade. If we start contact at 8, they've changed NFL contact to 14, and some science studies are saying that it may reduce CTE by a drastic amount later in life. And if starting your age grade contact later in life to mid-teens or early teens means you get another 2 or 3 decades on your life, it's pretty important that we address those things because we're just not looking at that at the moment.
Yeah.
And then what we're seeing in AFL at the moment, bro, is young players that have had 8 to 10 concussions are being advised to give their career up.
Yeah.
Because we want to make sure that these young athletes can live till their 80s, 90s, but getting a neurological disease at 50 and 60 is not what the sport's for.
No.
And we're not addressing that properly, are we?
Yeah.
So there's a couple key things that we're not addressing properly in rugby, and I guess it's going to take time and maturity, but I'm really thankful for you to sit here and speak to me about that, because we can't have scientists and people in positions of accountability and responsibility, like Ken Quarry in New Zealand Rugby, John Mayhew that works for New Zealand Rugby. These are doctors that are presenting information that is opposite of what multi-billion-dollar organisations like NFL are saying, that multiple concussions and the subconcussive injuries can lead to early onset dementia.
We're seeing it, and we're seeing it in people, and Billy's diagnosis shows us that New Zealand, we're not exempt. He's just the first of many. And one point we haven't talked about yet that I find incredibly interesting is, I've seen it in the military in the last wee while, is quite a few rules are changing. In the military context, it was, for me, in the realm I was in, you can't do so many explosive breaches anymore. You had to stand further away. You're only allowed to shoot certain size guns a certain amount of times, which is well reduced. And if I, relay that to rugby, we're tackle height. We've got these mouth guard sensors now. We're changing the rules, and we've got some of these rugby leaders saying, we're changing the rules to protect our people. And my question has been, why are you changing the rules? If there's no effect from the old rules, why are you changing the rules? What's the need? So for me, it's saying, we recognise that people are getting hurt and have been hurt, so we're changing the rules to protect the players. But again, I'm not seeing that leap to, how do we support all of those who are hurt before the rule changes?
That's a great point, bro. It's like the difference between the assessment and the care.
Yes.
So the rule change is like an assessment.
Yeah.
But they're not providing care. And
no.
I suppose the thing that we're trying to understand as you and your workmates, your partners, have been like innovative.
Yes.
Through experience.
Yeah.
Fearless to provide a service for young men and women.
Yeah.
To build their resilience. Why and how can we provide these, or why don't we provide these as our social services? And how can we encourage our leaders, politicians, our organisations like New Zealand Rugby to invest in an organisation like yours, or be innovative and create something that's specific to utilise rugby players, men's and women's, veterans, use their experience, put them into a platform that can provide the service. What's some of the experiences or lessons that make you try and understand that? Why aren't we seeing that in our culture at the moment? Our country's so small.
I know, and that's, I try not to talk around frustration, but it is a frustration that I observe. And, we hear a lot of people talk, and when I observe the behaviours of that talk, I don't see a lot of answers to it. And a big part of for me is observing people who say they're proactive, but again, when we look at their behaviours, I don't see that, and that's what I'm seeing with rugby, definitely, and I saw it in the military, obviously. Example with rugby, we've had somebody standing up saying, getting asked the question of what the rugby player pathway looks like for support and help, and somebody saying that they'll get some bullet points put up. To say that at the time of that question, when you're a service that should be providing that support already, and that's your mandate, like you're mandated to help people. Like, me, I'm in the Veterans Affairs, is the organisation that look after veterans. It's been almost 3 years of my engagement with them before I haven't even got any help yet. That's a long time. So when people are mandated to help, and that's what you're paid to do, you're paid to be of service to others. But I can't, and I mean, whether it's fear, whether it's hierarchy, these things, I just don't understand it. And it frustrates me that I see good people, like understanding Billy took his life, and veterans that are taking their lives, and knowing players that are hurt, and the more we talk, the more we find, and people engage with me that are hurt. I don't know why. I don't know why.
The comment you made about Rob Nichol getting up and speaking to players, I've been talking about that openly because it's a clear example that assessments aren't providing care.
No.
And then we can't, as a leader, speak to the players like we're providing care, where Billy is a perfect example. With the knowledge of his biopsy or
Yes.
autopsy results,
yeah.
and then I'm still alive and I can say that
Yes.
I've been assessed, but following that is no care, and I was lucky to be helped by Royce Willis.
Yeah.
But I suppose, how can we create more of a culture where we provide these services through someone like yourself?
Well, I think it's holistic too. Like, you know, you and I are looking at the Koru Clinic down in Wanaka at the moment. So,
can I just butt in there? Sorry, bro.
Of course.
So what we understand, and I've experienced this, that the services that are out there, like the Koru Clinic, I know Dr. Elizabeth Harris from Dunedin is running a service that has protocols for concussion, but I haven't been sent to those organisations.
No.
So, which is the discussion I'll be trying to have with New Zealand Rugby is ACC's responsibility about sending high-performing athletes to these services.
Yeah.
Is that not what we should be providing if the culture of a high-performance professional environment that's the expectation as a career?
Yes.
Do we not continue that on?
Yeah.
And then why aren't we providing that for veterans, athletes? If we don't get it, there's no way the general public are going to get that. So, of course, it comes down to a money thing.
Yes.
But how can we create these things in our society where it is more accessible for people?
Yeah.
And athletes are educated to reach out for those services.
Well, again, and we've talked before, like, for me, my beliefs, like, players shouldn't have to reach out for it.
Yeah.
It should be there, and it should be clearly defined paths for them to go down, because as you know, as Billy knows, you know, or Billy knew, and these other players, like, I'll give you an example. With Veterans Affairs, if you have a mental health issue, example PTS, post-traumatic stress, you have to go out and find your own support in a period until you get assessed and get somebody from them. So they offer you, I think, 3 to 6, you know, visits with a psych or a counsellor. But if I'm in the heights of post-traumatic stress and I'm curled up in a ball in my cupboard, am I going to the yellow pages to find that help?
No.
I'm not. And we're not. And our friends are not.
No.
And nobody I ever met, you know, has ever done that or been in the space to do that. So for me, that pathway needs to be laid out, and people need to be guided through it before they're hurt, so they understand, not some bullet points on a website. It needs to be a clear, defined pathway that people know when it is needed. Then I know exactly where to go. You know, I'm not in the dark looking for the yellow pages.
So the Players Association had opportunity to, because we don't have these services set up.
Yes.
They weren't able to send Billy to them, or myself, or others, obviously yourself, because we don't have the services set up.
No.
But then when someone reaches for help, the answer is always, there's nothing we can do.
Yes.
So we've got to get proactive.
Yes.
It needs to happen yesterday. And the services are already there. So we've been lucky to be in contact with NZ First.
Yes.
And it's great to see what they're doing in our country. The thing in our social settings, I suppose, is, which is frustrating to me, and you understand that, how can we not look after our veterans or our sports athletes that have given a lot to our culture for a long time, but we can spend billions of dollars on climate change policies that we don't use. So like you said, the hierarchy of priorities is backwards completely. So our taxpayers' dollars needs to be going to things that are really beneficial for everyone, obviously, but not just small organisations or groups that create that virtue signalling fulfillment that we seem to be after in our social settings, especially with politics. That's the way it seems to be going with the last few years since COVID.
I agree, and even in the case of, you know, what we're talking about with this, you know, agreeing with you back to that high level, if you play high level sport and then leave, you know, we're missing that high level care. You know, we see that in the military a lot, especially in the SAS. When you leave from that level of operations and then go into society and in society as it operates at such a lower level, of intensity. That can be really hard, and a lot of people are affected by that. So yeah, I agree, and just back to that. So that high level, if that's not funded by government or ACC, then it needs to be funded somehow. And all these people that are, offer money to things, well, that's a foundation or something that supports people in a holistic nature would be, a real key for us if ACC are not going to fund a holistic model.
Yeah.
And same for veterans. And I just want to touch quickly back on Billy's case. Like, Billy was getting help to a point, but it wasn't helping him. And that's
making him worse in some instances.
Yeah, so it's back
confusing him.
Back to that holistic nature of like identifying. Again, you and I have talked in something I didn't talk about during my SAS career. I was what we call an advanced medic. So my training when I was a young SAS soldier was in trauma medicine. And we learned, the aim in first aid is to not let the condition worsen. That's what first aid is the basic. Don't let it get worse. But we see with Billy, it seemed nobody was checking up on his treatment. Like you do a treatment on a casualty, you do that and you check to see if it's working. Like if somebody's got a gunshot wound, I'll pack it and then I'll put a dressing on it and maybe a tourniquet, and then I'll look and see if that's effective. And if it's not, I'll do something different. So with Billy, I just see it that, he wasn't given that, it wasn't working for Billy, whatever they were doing, whether that was a lot or not. Whatever they did, it wasn't working, but we didn't change. We didn't offer him anything else. We didn't give him other avenues to go down. We didn't give him that peer support to go down a new route to find help. And again, back to that frustration for me is that knowing that that's what we need to do, but we didn't. And I don't see us doing that again at the moment.
No, it's that's what we're speaking. We want to make change, and I think the thing that we've understood the last few months, for me anyway, is that the problem we're having is our science within New Zealand Rugby, ACC and the New Zealand Players Association, because that would be the group that would keep ACC and NZRU accountable to have the best world leading science, is they don't agree with the CTE effects on our emotional changes, and they can't seem to understand that multiple concussions over various years can lead to changes in personalities like Billy. So how can we get that service that we're talking about, the holistic service that can make sure he can live the best of his ability without getting worse, without having the most up-to-date science that might be peer-reviewed from not only New Zealand scientists, but could be Australia. AFL have changed their legislation and the way they're dealing with concussion through Professor Alan Pearce. He's been really, really good to, build these boards that are specific to concussion. And obviously, Chris Nowinski and the Concussion Legacy Foundation, where they're providing a service, and that's been going for 15 years. So well over a decade. New Zealand's so far behind that we have let someone like Billy, and there'll be others. I know that there's 50, 60-year-old people that play provincial rugby, All Blacks, that are suffering, and we haven't been proactive to understand the science to lead to the services, bro. So it's...
I told you, we talked a while ago around that, as a trauma medic, every time you got to a casualty, you'd look at what was called mechanism of injury. So what happened, and when you understand what happened, you can trace the effects and, what parts of the body could be hurt. Like, if you have a fall, then you think, back, neck, legs, those sort of things. If you're gunshot, it's going to be bleeding, and there's potentially broken bones and tissue damage. I'm blown away that we don't seem to be looking at the brain, any sort of brain injury, concussion-wise, in New Zealand, and going, okay, there's a mechanism to this. It's not just the brain. What are all the other bits that are affected when the brain's affected, especially with long-term concussion symptoms, I'm just blown away. We're not, like you said, we're not using our experts in New Zealand to look at the other parts of it.
Well, I know with the experts, I have spoken to specialists that are experts.
Yeah.
There are a few of the best neurologists in New Zealand that haven't been able to say their opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Which makes it hard, doesn't it?
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
hard for us to understand. So, are we providing the best service,
Yeah.
or do we have other agendas in mind? And
Yeah.
there's always the balance of making sure the game's successful,
Yes.
but we have to always provide a health service, and then look at the game secondary and how can we keep the game thriving in our country.
Well, the game won't go on if people are all hurt. You know, if people know they're going to be hurt, it won't continue. You know, it'll come a point where WorkSafe or somebody says, "Oh, this is no longer," you know, we can't keep doing
that's
this.
another organisation that needs to be aware of what's happening with rugby.
Yeah.
So it's WorkSafe's responsibility to make sure we are providing the best care in rugby.
Yes.
But if ACC's legislations avoid the scientific evidence that CTE affects us emotionally and behaviourally, and then do they really have the ability to judge or critique an organisation like ACC?
Yeah.
So after speaking to Jamie Arbuckle for NZ First, when he did that presentation in Nelson, he said that they weren't aware. They'd seen through the media and Billy's documentary and the publicity that he's had, that they weren't really aware of what's going on in terms of concussion and CTE.
Yeah.
So if ACC is an organisation and NZRU aren't speaking to our politicians, so then we can use our resources to provide services, there's some sort of hidden agenda behind the scenes that isn't genuine for healthcare.
No.
And it's sort of, it's not going to be good for us in the long run. I thought there's this doctor called Dr. Mobes from Australia. She's been giving people probability diagnoses. She said that roughly 10% of rugby players will end up with neurological issues.
Yes.
Which is, you'd think that, well, that's quite high, but, you know, is it acceptable?
Yeah.
I think it could be if we make sure we're looking after people,
Yes.
and the people that do get affected early, we take them out of the game, be responsible with good medical advice, or prevent our youth from being damaged before they need to, especially in their the key learning periods or their key development stages.
Yes.
I've heard that it's between 9 and 11.
Yeah.
So if there's 150 rugby players every year, and that is around 100 or 150, both men and women, so it might be 120 or something, or say 100 each. It's 10,000 people every couple years. In the future, 10% of that are going to have neurological damage. So it means there will be thousands of people that are damaged from rugby. We need to get services for them, and we need to make sure that we're being responsible around the care of our services and the rules in terms of age grade, how many concussions we're allowed to have, and what we're going to do if people have several in a few years. We can't wait, because that's already happening. It looks like 10% are going to be damaged. And to lose multiple decades of your life at the moment, that's not acceptable.
No. And it goes, you know, we talked earlier on about resilience, and, you know, like you said with the AFL in Australia, if you're a young person, you know, woman or man, and your dream is to play rugby at the highest level, and you are whatever predisposed to concussion, and you've got those concussions by 22, your career's gone. Man, pray that you are resilient. Because to take your dream away at that age, you know, is pretty hard. We've seen that with lots of people. You know, so that's just back to that resilience. If that is a thing that's going to happen, and we need to be ready for those people that are now mentally hurt because of the dreams have been shattered. You know, don't have an identity anymore. Maybe.
Maybe we could touch on that resilience stuff, like that post that Jordan Peterson, Dr. Jordan Peterson put up about why we've got resilience issues, because we've been taken away, we've had the fact of loss taken away from our culture and society, where in schools it's everyone's even, everyone's a winner for participation,
Yeah.
which back when I was a kid it was first, second, third. If you didn't make the rank you're hopeless, you can't get out the back.
Yeah.
Which the post that he shared was resilience or loss is teaching us resilience.
Yes.
And now we've got this a whole heap of youth that aren't resilient and prepared for these life changing challenges, situations that are going to happen to you.
Yeah.
No matter what, when
Yeah.
everyone goes through tough times.
Yeah.
And I suppose our suicide rates are up.
Yeah.
Both in veterans and in tradesmen.
Yeah.
Mental health, farmers, mental health in the frontline services, you were saying.
Or again, in the veteran space, New Zealand's never done a study. So it's a space that Australia just did a big one and found that their number of veteran suicides versus populace was huge. So if we don't...
Carry on talking, bro. Shut this.
If we don't know what that number is, we can't quantify it, which is shocking. If we can't actually know how many veterans have taken their life with suicide, why would we ever need a proactive, robust plan to help them? Same with concussion. If we don't actually know how many players are concussed and have these long ongoing symptoms, why do we actually need it? That's my devil's advocate to why rugby not doing anything super effective.
Yeah.
Because they don't actually know the full extent of what that is.
Yeah. But we also don't prioritise these services, because it's another example I would use as where we're prioritising the resources from television rights and New Zealand Rugby revenue from that Silver Lake, I think, deal.
Yes. Yeah.
Which it's not going to coach development.
Yep.
So this is a story that I'll tell. I've said to you before that there's one coach developer for the whole South Island, for the FPC coaches at all the regions and the NPC coaches.
Yeah.
One person to look after 40 different coaches to make sure that they can be the best coaches possible in our country. It's an example
it's a maths,
of where we're misappropriating our resources. And then the same up north, there's only 2 coach developers up there, where if we really wanted to build up our future coaches and experience and mentors for these young people to help them with their resilience and to be able to be prepared for the challenges in life. Wouldn't we put more resources into these types of services or coach developers or an organisation like Pakiri Adventure? Instead, we've got 250 employees in Wellington basically promoting, marketing, administers, trying to continue to grow the product. When the product is
the actual product is not given the opportunity to thrive.
No. And you can see that with the provincial rugby. They've been threatened with having the television rights taken away. So I suppose the thing is if we need to save money, which that's always the case. Start cutting people. We need to be real about it. If resources are short and we can't afford these services, lean up the organisation. Make sacrifices where are necessary to provide and grow what matters, which is, like you said, your biggest experience was the people, providing services for the people, which is high performance rugby, and I'd say the same with SAS, is really different to high performance leadership. That's what it looks like to me. How can they draw on the culture and up top, they're influenced by where they allocate resources. But how can we try and encourage them to be, well, if we give more to the bottom, and give more to growing our people, won't they get more in the long run?
Yeah, and that's that dichotomy of people can't see the future. People don't choose to see the future, and it's everything you're talking about. Now, I'll use the example of what you were saying about. Yes, I just wanted to touch on that. What you talked about with Jordan Peterson, and that, when we take winning out of sports, make everything neutral and even. One thing I've thought about that a lot, and especially in the work I do in the resilience space, and what I see is we don't look long term at some of the decisions we've made in the past, and example being that we've removed winning from sports, and that's created this, what we're seeing now with our young people not being resilient, be that mental, physical, emotional, all of those are part of that winning, not winning, formula that we used to have, that you and I went through. And I see it again in what we're seeing in professional rugby. We haven't looked to the future going, okay, we're going to be doing this full time. It's going to be more training, it's going to be more hits, it's going to be guys getting bigger because, and women, bigger as in we need to be faster and stronger, and that's the expectation of the game. And we're not looking down the road 5, 10, 15, 20 years to see, okay, our decisions, what effect are they having long term? And I don't think, again, we know that we're seeing that those decisions around not winning and losing, that's created people that are not resilient, our young people. We're seeing it in rugby now, with all sports now. We just talked to the guy in Aussie, all of their contact sports, we're seeing an outcome of the professional game now. Maybe we're not ready to hear that, but it's had an effect. Those decisions we've made has had an effect.
So do you know where that came from and who made those decisions? Like, who starts saying that it's better for youth to experience winning equally than to just have the top competitors win and then others are just losers? That's what it is. How does that change? Was it the...
No, I think from what I've seen, it's, we have these, academics or medical professionals that, psychiatrists, psychologists, who have a theory and for whatever reason they get to be the voice that puts their theory into practice. But again, my observation, especially the winning and losing, is that theory has shown us now to be harmful. In New Zealand especially, we can look at our mental health statistics and our young. It's all come from something, and if you deconstruct it, you can see it can be as simple thing as changing winning and losing to just everybody gets something. Yeah, and I think that's if we don't look at those long-term effects, then, if we don't predict it, it's like I told you the other day, Veterans Affairs have just made a statement that they are struggling to get cases seen because they've had a real upsurge in cases where I look and go, well, you knew East Timor happened and you knew Afghanistan happened, and that was more people. That's created more injury. How could you have not seen it coming? Again, as we talked in sport.
That was in relation to insurance policies?
No, just, claims for medical support.
Yeah.
With service-related injuries. Yeah.
Okay.
So if we don't dig deep into what our decisions are,
even shallow.
Yeah.
Just look.
Even shallow. Yeah. If we don't actually play it all out and see what may happen.
Yeah.
Just based on maybe somebody's theory and that.
Yeah.
Then we're seeing the repercussions of those choices.
We can't completely change society's structures.
No.
Of just spur of the moment ideas.
No. Those things weren't broken, and I think it led us down a path of people saying people were broken by winning and losing, and but again we've seen that now not to be true.
Yeah.
But we strayed so far from it. It was a social experiment to see. But what we're seeing now is more people hurting themselves when they shouldn't be.
We'll have to look into how that came about.
Yeah, and probably what we're saying with rugby too. Like, you can say you didn't see it coming, but you have to put your hand up and say that. You can't just be ignorant. And if that's the truth, that you didn't see it coming, and that's your truth, then so be that.
Yeah.
And everybody will get to accept that. But we're at a point now that we need to start helping people, because our ignorance or whatever, our lack of knowledge, whatever it may be, is got us here.
Fear,
and that's
fear of what it might take to help.
Yeah.
Fear of who could be accountable.
Yeah.
Or the damage in the game, it seems like. But we didn't have that fear in making decisions
of the other way.
By trying. Well, it was that. Well, the idea of having everyone's a winner is this crazy theory that we need full equity.
Yeah.
And inclusivity.
Yeah.
For people to be up the top, but that's just not true. Humans.
Yes. Yeah.
There's winners and losers. There's best and not as good.
Yeah. But even that, the winning and losing is the bigger thing, like we've just talked about, is the lack of, or the resilience component, that those things weren't just about winning and losing, they're about learning lessons.
Yeah.
And if you take lessons away, there's going to be, people are not going to learn.
Yeah.
And if you don't learn something, then down the road there's going to be an effect of that.
100%.
And that's, again, what we're seeing.
I suppose from, maybe you might be able to speak better to this than me, but is it our politicians' jobs to make sure we've got the right philosophies in our social structures?
I would say so, because they're the ones elected to govern us. And, and the people, when they do, they vote, have this expectation that the right things will be done. But again, it's, probably we're passengers in that decision sometimes. Not enough people take ownership of their own, knowledge and what those outcomes may look like. Yeah.
And maybe put too much trust in our leaders, where academics and theories can easily influence if they are portrayed in a way that we want to look after everyone and do the best thing for everyone.
Yeah. No different in diets, bro. People, you look at the right influencer with the right diet, with the best abs or the best bum, if it's a woman, and, just generalising, but, that's what people gravitate to because that's what looks good.
Yeah.
And I think it can be the same in this, people gravitate to what looks good or what sounds right, but again,
makes them seem like they're the best leader.
Yeah, yeah.
And doing the best thing, but practically over a longer stretch of time, it's really, really bad.
Yeah, and we don't take the time at the start to, like one thing we do in military mission planning is you go through all the cause and effect, that different options that you'll choose, and you'll come up with 2 or 3 different plans when you've looked at okay, if I make this choice, what's the outcome? And you'll do that a couple, three plans, so you've already war gamed what could happen, so when those things do happen, you're ready. Like, I've already thought about this, I know what the outcome could be.
Yeah.
I don't know what it'll always be, but I have an understanding what it could be, and I'm ready for that. If an enemy comes from over there, I've already thought about that, and then I can adapt to that very quickly. But everything you and I've talked about so far today, I don't see us adapting.
No.
Well,
it takes people like us. We're trying to adapt. So there's a theory thrown out.
Yeah.
We go a certain way with medical science, our culture.
Yeah.
And then people that think that's not right have to stand up and say, well, let's think about this and go the other way. It's like
and if we're only looking at it from an objective point of view, not with our ego or, from subjective or whatever, our patterning, all these other things, if we're just looking at the evidence and the behaviours, then quickly you can go, well, we need to change this because it's not getting us there. But it's only the brave who are prepared to put their hands up and say,
or the hurt.
Yes, yeah.
Like in our situation, with our both having problems with concussion and then experiencing what Billy went through.
Yeah.
If you don't want that to happen to somebody else.
Yeah. Especially when you and I both know others that are crying out.
Yeah. That's
hard. And they can't see any light at the moment, where you and I have been lucky enough to see some light. Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard.
I feel I'll touch on that point we spoke about before, where it's not just the physical pain that people go through, it's the isolation and social misunderstanding that is sort of creates a lot of anxiety and stress and loneliness, I suppose, which can lead to serious mental health when you're being judged by your peers. Yeah. And their understanding is limited because we're not guided or educated properly from our leaders or medical advisors.
Yeah, agree 100%. And as we talked about in the car this morning, just knowing that if I'm a young player who's had to leave the game for, whether it be concussion or whether it be injury, and my future had been based on making a certain amount of money out of that game, and now I'm not, that's just another stressor that can become a mental health. We know for men that money is a huge stressor that causes mental health issues, especially when society says we're the provider, right or wrong, but that's what we feel inside, and when you can't do that, it's just compounding. So I've got this injury, I've had to leave the game I've loved, I'm hurt, nobody understands me, I've got financial pressures, I'm hiding in the cupboard every day, I don't know what's going on in my head, and that's a lot. It's a lot if you are not getting explained to you that they're all parts of this thing. Yeah, huge. Yeah, we've seen the effect of it.
So we've been both lucky enough to get interrupted by an awesome conversation with Professor Alan Pears.
Amazing.
Stoked. Do you want to touch on a couple of things that he spoke about? Or?
Yeah, just amazing for me again that, Australia, where he is dealing with the exact same things as we are, and both the positive and the negative, the amount of people that they've got pushing back on this, including one doctor who's getting done for fraud and some other things related to CTE and mental health issues that players face. I think that was really eye-opening for me. Eye-opening that in his conversation, talking about the players that we'll talk about, but having to choose to retire early because of the effects of the game. One guy was only 6 concussions, where you, yourself, me, Billy, we know that they've faced far more than that, and haven't retired until later on. So that was eye-opening. And just his knowledge around CTE, how to get to CTE, or how we move towards CTE, and the fact that they've created a protocol to help not head towards CTE. That was awesome for me, and something that you and I will be able to take forward and share with other people and educate around that is amazing.
Yeah, that's probably maybe an expectation we would have for ACC and New Zealand Rugby to have that service already. If not now that we have that accessible, we can have that in our sports, in the veterans and with ACC. The player that you were just speaking about, his name's Nathan Murphy, played for Collingwood. He said he got advice from the AFL medical board. Only 24, so he retired on advice of some professionals. And there was another player that's named Angus Brayshaw, who played for the Demons. Do you want to speak about what he had to do?
Yeah, just again, one shout out to him for his courage to stand up. The fact that he was given a clear to play and knew that he was still suffering, and went and got his own brain scan with the latest technology, which showed that he was hurt, and having to go or turning up to the coaches and saying I'm not playing, and showing the actual scan that he'd had as the second opinion is amazing. To do that, to have to do that, one thing. The courage to do that, knowing that he was potentially giving away his career through being injured. Again, for me is huge, and that's the courage we need to see from all players that are hurt.
To be honest,
not right. But both you and I have discussed enough to know that we understand why they're not doing that, because there's not the support after that. If we knew, if you knew, I knew, they knew that there is support at the end, or when you make that choice, then I'd understand more players making it, but they're not, because it's not there. That's my observation.
I wonder how much of Angus's decision influenced the medical board for Nathan's decision to retire. So now that they're getting more and more cases of players having emotional changes, and they're finally being reactive to the situation, I can only hope New Zealand start putting these sort of protocols. What would they be called?
It have to be some sort of, it has to be a detailed protocol that's followed 100%. So we're ticking the box properly of, this person is hurt, these are the changes we're seeing. And just a side note to that, the biggest thing I was seeing in some of those interviews that we looked at was the families having to say how a player had changed. Not taking the player's words himself, but the families coming together and saying no. And we talked about it with the professor, that some of those other well-known coaches, and one particular coach who took his life, and the media framed him as being something, and his wife having to come out in a time of grief and saying, no, that was not what my husband was dealing with. It's those things that, back to that frustration.
Oh, do you want to touch back on Professor Alan Pearce to get his name right? On the study that New Zealand Rugby ACC and Otago University put out in the media. What were some of the key things that he said about that, if you remember?
Yeah, just hearing that, he and a guy in New Zealand challenged it when they went through the report and identified that the mouthguards that they were using to record data, that they were capping that data to show only what they wanted to see, that, and then the title of the article was that skipping and, or rugby is no different to skipping and running and the effect on the brain. And then them knowing that was used, the data was capped, so they weren't getting the truth. Well, the study didn't provide the truth to everybody, and the fact that they brought that to light within the media, and then, they were challenged, potentially about to be challenged in court around that, again shows us that we're trying to hide from something where we don't need to be, I don't think.
Yeah. And I suppose with knowing these things that we're really finding out from speaking to people that are brave and open, honest, we're not trying to damage the game.
No.
Obviously we need our veterans and soldiers to be looked after because that's necessary for our country.
Yeah.
We need contact sports because it's necessary, I think, for our country at this stage.
Yes.
So we're not being troublemakers. You don't think we are? I don't think we are. We're just trying to get more integrity and honesty.
We can be labelled as troublemakers because that's what people will do, but I think we're just trying to bring other evidence to the table that we have seen. And again, both you and I have talked to experts around the world, me in the special operations community, and doctors that are helping in that space, have been in that space for 20, 30 years, that have developed treatment protocols for people through what they've seen. So it's not you and I just sitting here making up our own science, but both of us sitting here knowing that we've been hurt over time, and that's had a real effect on both of us, and our families and loved ones support that. We can label us troublemakers if that's what you choose, but we're just trying to get people help. And both of us love the game of rugby, and have a passion for soldiers and veterans, and but knowing things have to be different to support them into the future.
Yeah.
And it's not what it is currently, and we need to change. And as we talked about before, we need to adapt faster than we are to give them that support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How can we wrap up, brother?
Yeah, I'd just say, to people listening to this, it's very easy to label people, especially in this concussion space, as mental health, and we can see that mental health is a reflection of an injury of the brain, not just somebody who's crazy. And again, talking to the professor as we did before, just him saying how that's still a stigma in Australia, and it's definitely a stigma here. And I told you about that LinkedIn article with Billy where they were talking about mental health, and I just aligned them to that. It's also a part of a brain injury. The mental health come from the brain injury, not the other way around. I think we need to understand that. And just on that, people listening that want to label Shane or I in that space, is we are not that. We're proactively seeking our own help, as we talked about with hyperbaric oxygen and other things we're doing. And I just want to yell out how much respect I have for you and what you're doing in your own journey, but also what you're doing for Billy and every other player that we can help. And 100%, so much respect.
Thank you. No, I feel the same about you, mate. And I guess we're being proactive for Billy's family to show that we did really care for him. We felt that it was wrong what he had to go through, and make sure that his name is well respected for the lessons we're going to learn from him.
Have learned,
yeah. And I think it's just the start, but obviously we can have more conversations, and we've got heaps to speak about with Pakari adventures, and hopefully we can connect with other specialists, scientists, other athletes from multiple codes to try and bring about positive change.
Excited.
Yeah, thank you for spending time with me, bro. I appreciate it. It's been awesome to meet you, and
Similar.
a lot of respect for you.
Yeah.